Just a quick intro to be about what we'll talk about today. So for you to be sure that you are in the right place, we'll have a discussion about the main trends, what we found in the report that we recently published with DigitalFoodLab. So what's happening there? What were the main conclusions? Obviously, if you want a more in-depth overview, we can only encourage you to have a read at the full report and also have a discussion with you. So we'll try to be quite quick on the presentation and to have then a discussion about what's happening. So maybe let's start by a quick intro about ourselves. So my name is Matthieu. I'm here with Jérémie.
Hello everyone.
So
I hope you will enjoy this webinar with us.
and in a few words about ourselves, we've been working together for quite some time now. I think about 15 years. So yeah, quite a long time. Initially as entrepreneurs, we created a FoodTech startup here in France, developed it, raised a bit of money and sold it, and then created DigitalFoodLab in very few words. What we do is that we work with mostly large to very large agri-food companies and beyond on two main topics. Number one is what we call exploration, and that's something that we'll talk a lot about today. What's happening? What are the trends that you should be looking at? Let's separate what is interesting from what is relevant. And number two is strategy. When you know that you want to play somewhere, how do you do it? Do you go for an acquisition, for investment? Where, how much does it cost? Who are the right partners? So basically, our job is to go from let's do stuff in innovation to have a very clear-eyed view on what's happening. And our scope is obviously global, as is the scope of this report that we'll talk about. Most of the things that we'll talk about are related to startups, but indeed there is a need to look at what large corporations are doing, because in food tech, as we'll see, it's mostly an ecosystem where we're talking about acquisition at the end of the day. It's not startups replacing Nestle or Cargill, but startups that will get acquired and will become key parts of these large companies. So you need to have a look at that and at regulation and research. But let's jump maybe with a first overview of what's happening in the ecosystem, in state of the ecosystem today, before looking at the trends. So to rewind a bit, why are we talking about food tech? For us, it's very simple. It's number one, there are what we call drivers of change that you all know super well about. Health, the increase of health-related problems with food, the climate-related issues. So food is impacting climate that we know about, but there is also the climate change, which is impacting food. So that creates a lot of challenges. And there are obviously the demographics challenge, especially in the West, where you have an aging population. So there is a need for answers. So we have these challenges, but we also have a lot of new technologies that have been developed out of food that entrepreneurs alongside the food supply chain, from feed to farm to fork, are using to create new companies. And that's why we often say that food tech is the future of food. These companies are creating an image and of what will happen in the future. And as I just said above, they will be scaled mostly by existing large companies. If we want to have a view of the health of this ecosystem, it's often a good way to look at investments. And here we have clearly a view of how things are doing. So you have a quarterly view, and where we can see that things are not doing super well, at least compared to a couple of years ago. So we have a period of increase, then stabilization, decrease, and now a new plateau, which is at a quite low level. And actually, if we want to compare it with other years, so if we look at a 10 years view, we are almost 10 years back. So in terms of funding, so it's quite bad. In terms of situation for this ecosystem, 15 billion is a lot of money, but it's not that much money if you want to have an impact on climate, health, or demographics. So indeed, there is a need for more funding, but at least if we want to be optimistic, things have stopped to deteriorate. So from now, we can say that things can only be better. That would be my optimistic take on this data. That's not something that will go into too much details because our goal is not to look at data and investment today, but a few elements there. The stabilization, this new plateau is mostly created by delivery startups, which are rising again, a lot of funding, especially in Asia, in India. Mostly large deals. So it's mostly very large investments, 1 billion plus investments in some companies, which are driving this funding. And what we observe is much less funding in early stage startups. And it's not due to investors being risk averse, even if it may be a part of the explanation. It's mostly due to less entrepreneurial spirit, less new startups, less new exciting startups. So that's maybe what could or should change if we wanted to go back to a better situation. So that was my first part on the state of the ecosystem. And obviously, if you have questions on that, or obviously on the part that we'll cover later, there is a Q&A tool in Zoom that you can use, and that's where we will source the questions that we'll be able to discuss together. So please put your questions there, and we'll have quite some time to answer them in 10-20 minutes. So here, let's say the core of what we wanted to discuss today, mostly on food tech trends. So again, let's go back to the basics. Why and what are we talking about when we talk about trends? And why are we using this trends curve, which is a tool that we love. We use other ones, but this one is very good at communicating, one screenshot what is happening, because most new techs follow this pattern. First, after years of research, you have some entrepreneurs that start to use this research and to create applications. Then you have a phase of excitement. Everybody's talking about it. It's the new future. There is often a third phase where you discover that either the business model or the technology is not really working. So there is a lot of disillusion. Many of the companies fail. That's often at the stage that you discover that companies have had when they enter these new markets to create a whole set of skills, but that actually it's better to separate it. That's especially, and we'll discuss about it, what we see in alternative proteins. You had initially startups doing everything, and now you have much more specialized companies, which often appear at this fourth stage where there is a renewed appetite, often with new companies. Very few of the companies emerging in stage 1 to 3 survive through this disillusion phase, and you have a new set of companies, of a new set of business models, new targets, and you start to have adoption, partnerships with large companies, and you have a fifth stage, which is mostly scaled adoption. So it becomes mainstream, everybody knows about it, and it's just a question of scaling to replace what was there before. So that's pretty much it. And so to go to the core of it, when we try to map what's happening in food or the future of food from farm to fork, we arrive to this graph with about 31 trends, which we can regroup in 6 mega trends. So as you can see, it's a lot of different areas. Maybe if we just want to have a comment on the whole curve, what we can say is that it's not the end of the day, or its decrease in funding is not related to it's over, everything has been done. It's kind of the opposite. Indeed, there is a decrease of funding, but as you can see on the left part, on the rising part of the curve, there is a lot of new technologies which are being developed. There is still new appetite compared to last year. So just in 12 months, we've added kind of a lot of new trends, new ecosystems. So it's still a very, very active ecosystem. So what say for the next part is to go in details in each of these 6 megatrends. So obviously, we don't have time here to go very much in depth into each of these trends and to understand what is specifically happening. What I want to point out is very big shifts to give you some ideas, and obviously in questions we'll be able to dive a bit deeper and go in maybe in more details and see what's happening. So number one trend, which we call digital retail. So it's the trend that covers everything related to digitization of the retail or delivery part of the supply chain. So it's not space where you have the most disruptive innovation, but it's the space where you have the most money being invested. So it's definitely a part to look at. The idea is very basic. You want to create innovations to make life easier for consumers to access food items more quickly and eventually in more personalized fashion. As I said, not a disruptive ecosystem. You don't have a lot of things that we spot on the very left part of the curve. You have mostly areas like new brands, restaurant delivery, which are very much mature, but are still super important, because if you look at where money is being invested, but also where acquisitions are happening, it's definitely in these two spaces. And also they are the proof that you can create disruptive innovation in food. Restaurant delivery, which is now ubiquitous. Let's remember that 10 years ago, it wasn't so much. All the big brands that we know, DoorDash, Deliveroo, etc., they are 10 to 12 years old. So it's a good approximation of the time it takes to create something that is disruptive or shift the way a whole food industry behave. Behind you have new retailers, which includes quick commerce, which is still very active in some parts of the world. And finally, smart stores, which, as position indicates, is not doing well at all, because as you can see, even Amazon is closing its smart stores. So there is still a very beginning of reinvention in that space. Second trend, which is the one of the big ones in terms of news and things that are moving, is one that we call sustainable ingredients. First, let's talk about terminology. We don't talk about alternative proteins, but sustainable ingredients, because there is a need to think beyond animal proteins. Many startups, either newly created startups or old startups, are moving their focus from creating alternative dairy proteins, alternative meat, to alternative sweeteners, alternative healthy ingredients, etc. So there is a bigger space beyond proteins. So, and why are we talking about it? Very briefly, because it's obviously about mitigating the impact of meat, dairy products, but also coffee, cocoa, sugar on us, humans, and also on the planet. There is a need also to anticipate a growing demand of these products. The growth of cocoa demand in the world is kind of astonishing. It's like 5-6% per year, but at the current state of technology, we can't produce more than 2-3% more each year. So basically, there is a gap. There is already an existing gap in demand and supply, so there is a need of innovation. And as I said in my intro, climate food is impacting climate, but climate change is already impacting food, and yields in all these categories are getting lower. So there is a need to find innovation. If we go back to the curve itself and look at different innovations and trends in space, as you can see, it's compared to delivery, a much more forward-looking, innovative space with a lot of things that are happening. The arrows show the moves between last year when we released the report, end of 23, and this new report that we released in January 25. And the +1 are the trends that we've added compared to last year's report. So as you can see, a lot of movement, new trends, of very, very active space. Well, a lot of things are happening. So we can't summarize everything there. So I've just chosen maybe 3 things to keep in mind for 25. Number 1 would be about scale. You can look at a startup like Liberation Labs, starting to build first large-scale precision fermentation facility. So that will be key because all these companies are trying to do things that are now slightly starting to work in labs, but we have a question, can it scale? And so having the first facilities, maybe end of this year, mid next year will be key to answer the question. 2 is plant cell culture with companies like FoodTech, which are using cellular agriculture, but for plants, in this case for cocoa. So a space that we look with very deep interest and could be maybe application this year or early next year. So very much a space to look at. And finally, another new space, which is protein discovery or protein AI. The idea of using AI to discover relevant protein in nature or to design protein out of nothing that match needs. So I realized this idea because for a very long time we've tried to do replication of things that were existing. Now we are entering a phase where we are designing new stuff to match our needs. So that's kind of exciting, and definitely that would be my 3 spaces to look at in sustainable ingredients in 25. So the mega trend about supply chain, if I want to be really quick on that, I'd say it would be a space where I would love to see more innovation, and that would deserve a bit more. It's about how could you make the supply chain, the food supply chain, more efficient while improving quality and reducing waste. So it's a mix of digital tools, all the tools that we know to avoid waste, either from the consumer point of view or from the retailers or farmer point of view, and all the biotech technologies that can be used on packaging. If we look at again at the curve, which is maybe not the right one, so we'll just look at that. There is basically not a lot of innovation, new packs, very little funding, not a lot of things that are happening. It's maybe not a space really that startups are really well equipped to do venture into, but that's still a space where we'd like to see more innovation. 4th mega trend would be what we call resilient farm. Again, some wording explanation. We don't talk about ag-tech or agri-tech or agriculture tech. We love to talk about the space of resilient farming because most of the technologies, companies being developed, we can be grouped in this goal of making farming more sustainable, to face sustainability challenges, to face the lack of skilled or unskilled workers due either to population change or lack of appetite for immigration, and also increasing resilience that is needed in some spaces like drought resilience, kind of stuff. As you can see on the curve, we can divide it in 2 broad areas. One which is called augmented farming, which is the short-term one, how do you make farming more efficient? How do you increase yields in the short term? So everything around precision farming, notably right now around irrigation, farm robotics, which are a very good answer to workforce challenges, indoor farming, which is doing very poorly, and second spot, which is about sustainable farming. So making farming more sustainable in the future with maybe insects, but mostly new inputs, sustainable livestock. So the idea of making livestock emit less methane mostly, and what we call future crops. And again, if I had two things to look at this year, it would be definitely what we call new crops or engineered crops. There are things that are moving fast on this space, and it's very exciting how you can create crops to solve the challenge of the future and today's challenge also, and also what we call sustainable livestock. So all the solutions, and there are very much a lot of them, to make cows, livestock, cattle, less methane emitting. So you have masks, you have vaccines, you have feed inputs. It's one of the spaces where we see this most news flow, deal flow. So definitely one of our two spots to look at in resilient farming. Megatrend number 5 would be about automation. Obviously, very exciting space to think about. Can we automate food? Food is a very unautomated space. We see a lot of things, either in cloud kitchens, new cooking robots, delivery robots, or service robots. If we put them on the curve, as you can see, it's an ecosystem where we don't expect a lot in the very short term, because either it has not really started, like 3D printing, or it's doing very, very poorly, like cooking robots or cloud kitchens, which are maybe getting out of disillusion, but not a space which is in a very, very good shape. Last megatrend, one that we spend a lot of time talking about in this day and age, food as medicine. So this idea of bringing personalized foods to solve some of today's health-related challenges, again, related to food. It's a very intricate ecosystem where you have at least these 4 areas of senior food, which is maybe the oldest part. So items that are dedicated to the oldest part of the population. Longevity, where you try to find supplements, new ingredients dedicated to helping you live longer. Healthy aging, which is targeting a larger population, which is more interesting about health span than lifespan. Food as medicine, which is gathering all these one, and which is somehow intersecting with personalization. So we like to have this vision. It's definitely a space that is getting a lot of attention from large companies, notably due to GLP-1. So all these drugs that are making you thinner and helping you to lose weight, which are obviously doing big waves in the US. So you have companies investing a lot in products that are marketed as less sweet, or with less high levels of sugars, or with healthy claims. So we see a lot of activity there. As you can see with these 3 examples, it's not really clear how big companies want to play there. I'm not sure they truly know themselves where they want to play, but at least the idea of having new ingredients, new companies creating products that have health claims is definitely something that they follow, and that should be followed by this ecosystem. If we look at the trend that we spot, let's say that there is one that we talk mostly about, which is healthy aging. So it's creating ingredients, mostly using sustainable ingredients technologies, so precision fermentation, cellular agriculture, to create ingredients that have an impact, a positive impact on your health. So it's either to reduce a negative impact, like new sweeteners that reduce the impact of sugar, or ingredients that have a positive impact, like on your longevity, your health, on your microbiota. So very exciting space to look at right now. Again, if I do the exercise of thinking about 3 areas that I would like to have in mind in 25 in this space, it would be number 1, what we call GLP-1 companions, so food products or ingredients that you can put in food products that should have a booster effect or for your GLP-1 diet or cure, and also to alleviate all the consequences, after effects of the drugs. There is number 2, sweeteners. So we see a lot of appetite there. I think at DigitalFoodLab we spend quite some time talking about this space with clients. So there is a huge appetite for that. And third would be around aging. So can we find ingredients, formulations, services, coaching that help people in their journey to have a better health span and lifespan? And that's definitely one of the key spaces to consider and look at. So in a nutshell, a lot of things are happening. What we often say, I think that the hardest part of, in many instances of our job is what do we do with information? Because everything is interesting, or at least a very big chunk of all these trends can be really kind of interesting to each large company. So there is a challenge to transform what is interesting into what's relevant. You can't be interested into everything. And then there is challenge to find where do you want to play. So we often say, it's often best to avoid what's super hype, what's already obvious, and maybe what's super down right now. So that's what we often say is our playing box. A good strategy maybe is to have an edge of your bets and being active at least in these 3 segments. And that's just obviously an overview, but that requires quite some work to define what's interesting, what's relevant, what do we want to play. To give you an idea, that's obviously something that we often do with clients, and to give you an example of something that we've done recently with a CPG company in the protein space. We've looked at everything happening on their downstream value chain, so the products and the ingredients that they use. So together we define their innovation curve, what kind of technologies and ecosystems they should put on the map, then define what to follow, what to act on, and on the 3 key spaces to act on in the short, medium, and long term, define a strategy of acquisition, investments, partnerships with startups, incubators, VCs, to be clear. And in a summary, what we've done is define what to do in the next 5 years to be still here, to compete in the next 30, 50 years. This leads us to maybe the question about what do we do now, what's to expect of 25 and beyond. I'll share with you our predictions, quote unquote, about 25. In terms of funding, we don't expect any significant bounce back, and especially not in Europe. We can expect a small to moderate increase in North America and eventually in Asia, depending on some obviously political and central banks events. In terms of specific categories, as we are still at kind of high inflation rates, notably in the US and some other parts of the world, we don't really expect any meaningful improvement for categories like plant-based. Sales will improve, but only slightly. Alt proteins as a whole, it will be challenging. And for categories like vertical farming, it will be probably still a very bad year. Situation creates some opportunities, especially for applications of these technologies beyond food. I don't know if you've spotted that, but in the past couple of months, we've seen a lot of startups which are raising funds in, as I said, materials, in cosmetics, startups that were initially operating in food. So that's interesting to see that there is this evolution. Agriculture, agtech should be do well. All this topic around sustainability and mission is still there, and a lot of things around B2B application and healthy aging. We still expect some evolution on regulation, but maybe less positive than in 24. As you probably know, in the US, there is an open discussion on the evolution of the regulatory system, so that could really shake things up. And also current political context make also open the discussion for a lot of controversies around new technologies, new products. So we still expect a lot of controversies about experimentation that have been maybe not well communicated to the public. Maybe on a more optimistic way, we could expect some positive updates in Europe and eventually also in Japan. We expect some good news for some of the product that we've talked about sooner. And finally, on key trends, if we look at what large companies are doing, we observe this move of what we called open innovation towards venture clienting. So it's almost over the days where big companies were open, trying to talk to a lot of startups, but not really sure about what they were doing. Now it's much more targeted. We know what we want, we know what we need, and we just want to partner, buy, invest in a startup that just match our needs. It's better in the short term. I'm not sure it's very good for the ecosystem in the medium to long term, but at least we can expect more partnerships announcements this year. Again, not something very, let's say, mind-blowing, but new climate events or extreme climate events will create new hypes. So as we saw last year with cocoa, coffee, vanilla prices, making a wave of investment in alternatives. So we just have the same thing happening in the past months in egg prices, and we are starting to see a lot of appetite for startups doing kind of the same thing. So should be the same next year. And in a nutshell, if you are as many people lost about everything happening in this space, that's quite normal because too many things are happening every day. Startups raising, startups closing, partnerships, etc. So that's obviously something that we'd love to talk with you and help you with. We have an offer around that. We help about 10 clients on this intelligence offer where we deliver each month the news that you need to know. So it's 100% personalized overview of the key technologies, ecosystems that are happening. And the idea is very much to be connected to what you are interested in and to deliver the information that you need to know, not all the tiny startups doing stuff everywhere. And also, why is it relevant for you to know that? So that's what we want to deliver. And as I said just before closing down and going back to your question, our goal is to help you on this complicated oftentimes, but exciting journey to what we call the future of food. So solving all these very big challenges and also sizing up all the opportunities that it creates, and that what we do with about 50 to 60 clients. So we're quite happy about that. And what we've been doing right now for the past 5-6 years. So we love obviously to open discussions with you and see if there is an interest for us to collaborate. And now we'll have some time, about 20 minutes, to answer your questions. So if you've not done that yet, please ask them directly into the Q&A tool.
Thank you, Matthieu. Yeah, everyone, if you have questions, do not hesitate to ask them in the tool. I can start by answering some of questions. There are some interrogation about how we define and place trends on the innovation curve. To answer that, we use different kind of information. First, soft info, I can say, from our expertise, discussion with entrepreneurs, investors, and also large companies, and hard data. Hard data are investment numbers of startups to compare the strength of the different ecosystems, compare the involvement through time, tech maturity, etc. So trends are put like that, and they are put regarding their current state, not their potential, really their current state. And one important point to notice is that a single technology can have multiple applications. For example, we put precision fermentation on the curve, but you can use it for dairy proteins, for sweeteners, for materials. And in this case, if you deep dive one technology like that, you will have the different application at a different on different segment of the curve. And of course, there are also some differences regarding geography. Trends are not the same if we focus on Asia or on Europe, etc. Matthieu, I have some questions for you. First one, some question about what is happening right now about the geopolitical context and global tariff war. Trump as a new president in the US, etc. You have an opinion about how it could impact food tech ecosystem?
Yeah, good question. The very quick way to say, I'd love for it to have an impact. It would mean that many startups were doing sales, but that's not really the case, because what we're talking about today is mostly startups that are not doing so much sales, so they are often projecting to do things in the future. So that number one. But beyond this, very quick answer. No, we don't expect a lot of impact in short term, because as I said, very few sales and very few companies, because we are in food, are exporting things from Europe, from Asia to the US. What it could have as an impact, it could reinforce something that is already strong, where we see companies doing R&D in Australia, in Europe, in Israel, and then doing sales in the US. But now, definitely what they will do, that they will do industrialization in the US. So once, or a few years ago, there was a temptation to do R&D in Europe, factory in Europe, and sales in the US. Now it will be R&D in Europe, factory and sales in the US. So that will be maybe the main implication, and again, quite negative one for the ecosystem. Oh, negative not for the ecosystem itself, but negative for these countries that will basically just finance R&D and lose the main goal, which was create jobs, factories, etc.
Thank you. You said that there is less entrepreneurial activity. The first question is this more regional topic and are there differences between the different regions of the world, or is this a global issue? And more generally, we have some questions regarding trends in Asia, in Latin, etc. So do you have some insights about main differences between regions and main trends that could evolve or become stronger in some part of the world?
Yeah, good point. As you said when you answered the question on how trends are made, and also said that they are different from region to region, that's very true. Everything that I've said is a global overview. There are obviously differences. This decrease in entrepreneurial activity is very much something that we see globally. It's happening a bit everywhere. Why is it happening? First, because there is less money, and also because many of the leading examples of startups are just failing. So what is your end game as an entrepreneur is often to sell or do an IPO, or at least have some form of exit. If the only exit that you hear about is bankruptcy, it's not really a good motivation. So it's happening everywhere. There are obviously areas that are more affected than others. Europe is more affected than the rest of the world because it had a couple of good years beforehand. Let's say in Asia, what is specific is the ecosystem was still emerging, so it not really much, not so much affected by this decrease. We still what we see is a transition a bit from a 100% delivery ecosystem where all the startups were doing just one thing, delivery, to an ecosystem that is more open, which is doing more tech. So we actually see an emerging ecosystem in some countries like Japan, which had not so much of an ecosystem, South Korea, Singapore, even India, where we start to see something. So Asia is, let's say, promising. And Latin America ecosystem is interesting in agriculture, but beyond that, it's not so active, I'd say, right now.
Thank you. You talk about partnerships between startups and large companies, saying that we expect that it will be more and more partnerships. Do you have some insights about how to create those kind of partnerships, how to find the best target from the large company's point of view, but also from the startup point of view? Could be interesting.
Yeah. That's let's say that's the $1 million question. What I like to say is if we wait to find the perfect partner, like the startup that has already sales, that has in technology 100% proven, etc., we'll just wait a bit too much, and everybody will have already made partnerships with the relevant startups. So what is super important to understand is that it's about taking some risk. And so what we said initially, it's also hedging your bets. So making just one partnership on a single technology is maybe a bit too risky. So that would be my opening. And then once you've acknowledged that you're taking risk and that you're not super sure that precision fermentation or any other technology will work, maybe you can say, okay, we want to bet on this technology and this trend with other trends. Then what a big company has to find is first, on each trend, each application, there are not so many startups. There are maybe 5, 10, 20 that are relevant on each area. And then what you have to find is, and being helped by external players like us, but others, to find the right technological match and also business match. What is the right type of partnership? What will you give to the startup? What does the startup give you? And that's very much fine-tuning. There is not a very simple, clear pattern that you can replicate on each use case.
Thank you. We keep doing with large companies, and what big players in food today are looking at in terms of trends? What is their big topics for this year?
Yeah, if I had only to put two on the map, it would be definitely, and without a lot of surprise, sustainability. But that would be maybe more for European players now than American ones. But at least it would be about a fear of regulation and how to reduce the scope 3 or upstream impact. So that's very much a topic for companies that have anything to do related to dairy, say methane emissions, something like that. So that would be a big topic, how to measure, evaluate, reduce my impact. And number two would be around healthy aging, which is again very broad, but how can we leverage all these new technologies, which in many instances, some of them are getting mature. How can we leverage them to create new products, have new ingredients, sweeteners, health positive ingredients that we can include in the short, medium term in our products?
Yeah, thank you. Funny question because it's about artificial intelligence, and we have just talked about it in our last newsletter. So I think you have an insight in mind. What will be the main impact of AI, or what can we expect from AI in ag and food tech?
I'd say that's a very good, tough question because there is no single point that you can point to. It will be, as for I think everything, it will be useful at each point of the value chain. But if I should select again two, number one would be on protein discovery, product discovery. So I think it can help to create new products, etc., new recipes. But where it can be super useful is to accelerate either what we call bioprocesses, so production of synthetic biology, but it can also be super useful at discovering new proteins in nature. So I would love to see it, and I believe we'll see it, accelerating the path of synthetic biology from labs to our kitchens. And number two, which is more an expectations than a prediction, it would be from the consumer point of view, creating tools to connect you, consumer, with your needs and food. So let's say I'm Matthieu, I'm living in Paris, here is my age, my needs, etc. Can I have something to interact with that will tell me to age better, you should eat this or that? And that would be good for everyone, obviously, but that could have very, very meaningful impacts also on the food industry, because it could also mean that if one of these tools was available, easy to use, maybe it could have impacts as big as GLP-1 on reducing the amount of certain types of food.
Thank you. One question, I think it's about our watch that you have presented briefly. How do you manage to transfer all news and info into knowledge?
Yeah, very, very briefly on that. The idea is to, number one, it's our job to know everything that's happening. So that's our job, and that's where AI can also help, because a lot of things or startups are believing that a lot of things are happening, but actually not so much interesting things are happening. So that's basically our job. And our second mission is to understand what is relevant to your business. You don't know, even if you operate, I don't know, in dairy, you don't need to know about every single startup which is saying that they have a new product. And our job is to understand what you need to know and to create the right type of content for the right type of person, which is not the same in R&D, innovation teams, or top management. So that's basically what we try to provide as a service.
Thank you. So we have more specific questions about some some specific trends, by the way. I have a question about precision fermentation, and the fact that today on our curve is not far away from the decision part of the curve. So people that are working on this technology, should they be worried or not? And well, yes, can you explain maybe the fact that all trends at this stage are not all going to disillusion?
Yeah. But I think for precision fermentation, it's definitely going there. So in that case,
I think it depends on application.
it depends on application. So first, going back to what you said, initially, precision fermentation can be split. If you're doing a sweetener or if you're doing dairy proteins, etc., totally different. But what people talk most about is dairy proteins. So in that case, and I go back to exactly what you said. Number of companies created, down. Number of funding, of funding, it just plummeted. We went from billion levels to tens of millions. So showing that there is a problem. Number of partnerships announced, plummeting. So, and you just open a discussion with anyone, big noises of, oh, we're not sure, actually, can they scale? We're not really sure. So all the indicators of, oh, excitement is over, are there. So now the question is, do we go from excitement is over to, oh, actually, it works, and we go back to just ramp up towards scale, or are we entering a more in-depth phase, which I believe we are entering for some of these companies, and we see some of them pivoting to sweeteners or to new types of product, as I said, materials. So definitely not all applications are on the same page. If you're doing precision fermentation for sweeteners, or I don't know, lactoferrin wouldn't be the same as other dairy proteins.
Thank you. You briefly talk about plant cell. Do you have more insight about it, and specifically estimation of timing when it could reach price parity with other alternatives?
Yeah. What is making everybody excited about that, so that's why it's very much on the rise, is that price parity is maybe not that far. So the idea is very simple. You take the same principle of cellular agriculture. So you take a plant cell, you put it in a bioreactor, you feed it, and it multiplies, you collect it, and boom, you have either cocoa, sugar, or in other instances, vanilla. In the case of cocoa, with a price of $11,000 a ton, it's not so hard to imagine how you reach price parity in just, let's say, right now. Problem is much more to scale production. It appears to be much simpler than to scale meat or dairy production in cellular agriculture, much less constraints. So, and even much less regulatory constraints. So that's why we expect even to see a first product in the market by the end of this year or early next year. So then question will be the same. will be the big mover? Can we sustain scalability?
Thank you. Last question for today, before we conclude, about healthy aging. How large companies are positioning themselves regarding this new trend, and also how they react to GLP-1 emerging and in the US, but also in Europe.
Yeah. And also point not to forget, GLP-1 is very, very big in the US. It's even bigger in China. So we shouldn't forget that. That's also a very, very big market, even if we don't spend too much time talking about it. Big companies are still in the discovery phase of healthy aging. There is not yet a shared definition of what it is and where they want to play and how they want to play, because it can be very broad. Is it simply making healthier recipes of the same products? Is it about different brands? Is it about personalization? Is it about betting on very long-term health positive ingredients? I think it's a mix of all of the above. And right now we are very much in the strategy phase. Let's define what we can do. And also past examples of very, very large companies have shown that you can't go too fast into this healthy aging, food as medicine space. Consumers are not that ready, so you need to find a way to enter it quite slowly and to create differentiations. Because the problem is that most of the product that you can put on the market right now with the ingredients that we've talked about will be very much expensive and more expensive. So there is a need to find the right way to enter this market, and maybe GLP-1, because people with it are serious challenges. First, they want to be efficient, of course, because it's expensive, but also they want to avoid all the consequences. So they have an incentive to buy these products. So maybe that could be a right target.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Matthieu. Thank you, everyone, for being there for this webinar. I remind you that you can download our report about trends on our website for free, and also I encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter to have analyze and food tech insights each week in your mailbox. That's it. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Matthieu, for your presentation, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.